So we'll get started. Thanks everyone for joining in. We have a session today around generative AI for tech professionals, where we'll be discussing the skill expectations in the generative AI era for tech professionals. So we have our panel as well, and let's get right into the session. So this is Abhinav. I'll be moderating the session today. I work as a senior product manager for AI category courses at Interview Kickstart. I have been working in the last couple of years with hiring managers, team leads, industry experts from tier one companies for researching and knowing the trends about AI and in particular generative AI. My primary experience is in launching outcome-focused learning programs, and I'm very excited to basically bring this panel discussion to you, which will be directly focusing on how the skill set requirement is changing so that you can get a fair amount of idea and a competitive edge in your job market. Right? So this is the agenda for today. As I just said, right? The sole question around which the entire discussion is going to be revolving around is why we need to talk about generative AI for tech professionals, right? And by tech professionals, we mean non-machine learning professionals. So that's the idea. So we first start with sharing some market insights on job postings to set the context, and then we'll jump right into the discussion with our expert panel. We want the session to be very interactive, so we'll also be taking questions from you guys time to time. So this is our panel today. I'll just introduce the speakers for you. So we have Shivani. She's an engineering manager at LinkedIn, heading AI ML teams there. We have Naveen. Naveen is VP of engineering at Vouched. And in the past, he has also been head of applied science engineering at Amazon. We also have Praveen. Praveen comes from a PM, product managers and technical program managers background. He has also have extensive experience in software engineering and cloud. So currently he leads product at Rafi, and he has also led PM and TPM teams at Microsoft and Meta. So welcome everyone. Welcome Shivani, Naveen, Praveen. Thanks a lot for joining in. Yeah, so before we get started, let's get to know you guys as well. So I would request all the attendees to drop their name, role, location, and companies in the chat, so as to see basically who all we have and just get to know you guys better.
Yeah, Abhinav, looks like chat is disabled.
Oh, okay. Just give me one moment.
I think it's now enabled. I see people able to start chatting.
Okay. That's good. Sorry for the inconvenience.
But do raise your hand and let us know if still the issue. Okay, I can see some responses.
Okay, so we have Mithun, Senior Solution Architect, New Jersey, looking for jobs. Moe, Cloud Solution Architect, NYC. Thanks you guys for joining in. So we have folks from SDE background, Xavier Software Engineering, product managers, senior SDMs at Amazon, senior engineering software, data scientist, Anil engineering manager, Boston CTCT. Nice. We have Raghu, embedded senior staff engineers. Cool. Thank you guys for joining in and putting your quick intro in the chat as well. Welcome everyone. Is one Shravana. Viren Thakkar. Cool. Thank you guys. Thank you. Thank you for joining in. Thank you for putting your responses there. Let's keep it going, and then in the meanwhile we'll move ahead with the agenda as well. So a few logistics will make the session very interactive today. So please feel free to drop your question in the Q&A. So for any general discussion, we can put it on chat. But if you have any questions, let's use the Q&A box effectively. We'll be moderating that primarily for questions. Raise your hand if you want to speak up. But I will be unmuting you guys in some scheduled manners in some intervals. So wait for your turn, and then we'll unmute you guys accordingly. Yeah. So let's get started. So I'll just take the next 5 minutes to quickly share some insights from our recent sort of survey that we have done on job market. Right. So this is something. This is a survey that we ran internally. So we looked at about 10,000 job descriptions from job profiles such as software engineering managers, program managers, product managers, and etc. And the things that we were looking at it, what sort of skill sets are basically there, and especially the new skill set that are being asked. So one interesting insights that we got is about 10 to 15% of these job descriptions in each of these job roles, right? Be it software engineers, engineering managers, and so on, started asking generative AI based skill sets in their either it's good to have section or mandatory section, right? But they have sort of started mentioning it. And a few lines I have sort of also written here, such as building applications on top of LLMs, creating AI product strategies, good understanding of LLMs, generative AI, RAG, guardrails. These are from different job descriptions, but you get the idea. Solid understanding of generative AI workflows, apply emerging AI ML concepts in the security domain, right? So this is all practical focused, some sort of a knowledge, either how it works or how it can be leveraged in their core day-to-day job role, right? So this is the snapshot. I have also kept some snapshot for reference. Let's say there are some screenshots from software engineering job descriptions, right? The source of all of these is LinkedIn, right? So generative AI skills are sort of becoming a norm, right? Right now, as I said, it's starting the trend, and we have insights basically going up. So generative AI skills, very important, as you can see, to give you competitive edge in the job market, right? And this competitive edge then will enable you to, let's say, negotiate for higher salary packages and etc. And all of these are, if you read through the highlighted sections, are all of the expectations are around the practical aspects of generative AI, not like building LLMs and training LLM. That scope is a little bit different from here, right? Then similarly, we have test engineers as well. And then the test engineering part as well sort of mentions the AI ML sections or generative AI sections are good to have part. These are core test engineering roles or core software engineering roles. These are not the roles basically where, let's say, you're working with AI ML teams, or this is a machine learning role which is called software engineering role. This core backend full stack and front end role, where these are the additional skills that are being asked, some sort of a know-how on these things. Similarly, product managers. So for product managers, the good thing which is happening is that they're calling out the specific generative AI skills in the title as well. So product managers, generative AI, senior product managers, generative AI, and etc. And these are basically apart from these roles are apart from the ML centric projects, right? And where product managers are expected to be aware of generative AI tech to be able to build those sort of product strategies and etc. Right? So that is the idea, right? In case, let's say, you have some existing product, proper tech product, and you're integrating generative AI into it, right? So in those sort of cases as well, the job descriptions were asking some sort of a know-how on generative AI. Similarly, we have technical program management. Right? The scope again over here is to have a good understanding of AI use cases, business integration consideration, and some sort of a know-how on how a generative AI based projects to be delivered. Right? So that is the key sort of an insights we got from a technical program managers. This thing. Similarly, engineering managers. Now the focus is more on how let's say LLM applications or LLM technologies can be sort of leveraged in your existing product or existing architecture. So again, a very good understanding of business integration, because that's what matters the most. And then generative AI system design consideration. How would you integrate generative AI into your system, and everything that comes up that comes with it, right? So managing the cost, ethical considerations, guardrails, all those things are then expected in general from all these JDs, and these are just a sample of it, sample job descriptions. Similarly, DevOps, site reliability engineering as well. Now, in few of the JDs, the penetration of AI ML is lesser than others, but it has started showing up. It's non-zero. That was the main idea. Cybersecurity engineering, a lot of applications in cybersecurity do involve use case of machine learning and AI, right? Because essentially the field is basically crunching a lot of data to detect anomalies and plan for better contingencies. So not surprised basically that these state-of-the-art ML AI / generative AI applications are being expected or are being utilized in security as well. Cloud solution architecture. There are a lot of specialized role which are basically focused on building AI ML on cloud platforms such as either Microsoft, Amazon, or Google for scaled applications, right? And as you know, these companies are also doubling down on their AI offerings on the cloud, right? And for that, they need solution architects who can understand these things and propose solutions, pre-sales, post-sales. This is machine learning engineering. Now, machine learning engineers are in fact need to know LLMs, generative AI, because it's their core field. But one key thing here is that the scope is completely different now. In all the JDs that we have seen, the scope mainly there was from an applied point of view, where you utilize those skills to in that particular job domain, like do something practical on top of it. For machine learning engineer, the scope is primarily on building those LLMs, right? Either building, training, or fine-tuning those LLMs. There was, I think, the most amount of LLM keywords were sort of found in ML engineering job descriptions itself. Right? Similarly, data scientist. Now, for data scientist, it was a mix. You have LLMs or generative AI knowledge being asked from an applied point of view, where they're supposed to, let's say, use that skill for their for some inferences and etc. And at the same time, few specialized role, even for the senior data scientists and etc., were asking for LLM fine tuning, training, and then such roles as well. Right? So that's the idea. This is where the analysis sort of concludes. I just wanted to set that expectation, and I think then we'll have some questions to fuel in to get the questions to get the discussion started with the expert. Right. So let's jump right in. We'll probably, let's say, start with Shivani. So hey, hi Shivani. So yeah, wanted to quickly, if you can head start the sessions with sharing your sort of idea, how do you anticipate the evolution of generative AI in general and its penetration into, let's say, the entire industry for the next couple of years?
Yeah, definitely very excited for this new wave. I mean, I've been doing this for 20 years, so I keep seeing new waves come up and go, but this one definitely seems like with all the other integrations that have come together and all the capability that have come together is going to be here to stay. One of the things that's going to happen is I think the hardware cost is going to really keep going down as time passes by, and that's going to make it very accessible for anyone to be able to, train these models. Or even if not train them, like leverage them for inference, either in nearline or in offline, or use the embeddings for purposes like RAG and things like that. So this is going to become more and more the commonplace for everyone. So I think generative AI is going to be more and more. I can imagine like backend engineers, SREs, all of those folks who have been doing their own work so far will be using generative AI more like part of day-to-day job. Like we had a migration ticket in our company where we wanted to do pick to Spark migration, and using Copilot, the tools team built a automatic pick to Spark migration tool where that migration would happen automatically and a PR would be issued. And all the people on the team have to do for the data pipelines is to actually, just review the code and test it out, right? So this is a simple example of how tools team is using generative AI to accelerate migration of some of the legacy code and things like that. So I can imagine that this is just going to get more and more the norm. Yeah.
Cool. And let's say in your company, especially, let's say for for more non-ML roles, right? For the professionals in general, let's say people working in software and all, how are they adapting it? How are they seeing these things in their normal day-to-day workflows?
Exactly. Like I mentioned, using existing tool, knowledge of the existing tools is very important, and as well what they can do. I do see that, of course, like managers like me always use ChatGPT and other resources to kind of make the emails more polished and things like that, which is an example of how we're just being the users of the tool, right? But actually really producing a solution that can scale to the entire company is possible for anyone, right? Like if your company has an enterprise solution for an LLM, any part of that ecosystem can be touched using the LLM, whether it is tools to kind of do automatic migration for some different language, like translating code from one language to the other language, like Pick to Spark, for example, or building a backend system supporting, let's say, trust and safety, like being able to hook into generative AI tools, identifying what are the like integration points, what are the hardware constraints, all of those things will be a part of the backend role in of itself. But yeah, I think it's going to become more and more a part of the non-ML work as well. And there won't be a distinction anymore between ML engineers and then non-ML engineers. It's just going to become a part more and more. We're already seeing 10 to 15%, like, backend engineers who are needed to have this experience and knowledge. And so it's preferred thingy, but over time, it's going to become a requirement.
Got it. Thanks,
Yeah.
thanks, Shivani. So I would request the audience members also to put in their questions in the chat if they have any follow-up questions, any thoughts and all. So obviously this is an EMA. So this is your chance to basically ask any questions, any doubts, any clarifications, anything you want to bounce off over here.
I see one question here from Senthil saying, how can the training be added on the resume? So I do think that what you should be able to add on resume is a project that you do within your work that applies generative AI for what you do day to day. Of course, I mean, be safe. Don't just hit public endpoint with private data and things like that. But there may be ways in which you can transform your day to day, and then that will like really lift up the entire org and things like that. So yeah, there's a course related question from Ramana.
Yeah, so Ramana, we can share the course details towards the end. We do have courses around applied generative AI, which is about 10 from 10 weeks to 14 weeks long. So that's the idea, but we can share it later on as well.
Now, I just wanted to add to Senthil's question in terms of how training can be added to your resume, right? It's not really the training, right? It's about what you're going to learn out of it, and how do you validate what you've learned is what your credentials are going to be, right? So it's always, like how do you prove, right? Like I can just say like I attended 100 different trainings. Does it matter to the person that's hiring me or the company that's hiring me, right? However, if I say using that training methodology, I have either executed a project to Shivani's point, or even like I've gotten a certification, right? Like let's say, I'm pretty sure there'll be like hundreds of new agencies that are going to come up with their own certifications. And if you are one of those, early adopters of that certification path and get certified, right? Then, that's a proud moment for you. And that kind of validates that, yes, you were trained, and then the certification is kind of a badge that proves that you have gained some expertise at least in the path, and that can clearly indicate, yes, you are in the right path, and that can be proven to the hiring company or the manager.
Makes sense. Thanks, Praveen, for adding that up. Cool. So we do have one more question, which is, I'm a cloud infrastructure role. What AI skills would help me further my careers? So Praveen, would you like to take a stab at it?
Sure. Yeah. So again, it's think of what happened before cloud came into picture, right? Cloud is basically another form of infrastructure. It's just that you're agnostic of where it is hosted and how you're consuming it. And I'm pretty sure, being a cloud infrastructure role, you have done a lot of automations, right? So you don't want to, you would have converted a lot of repetitive tasks into automation. Now, think of AI as an extension to that. It's basically enhancing, whatever you were doing as repetitive, or and even something that is like a solution that somebody might have already implemented. AI basically enhances that and gives you a I would say like a starting point which is much farther than where you would originally start otherwise, right? So it means like adopting AI skills will help you understand what my new starting point is going to be and how fast I can achieve this new objective, right? So it doesn't matter what role you are in. It's all about how do you apply it specifically for your role. And I've been cloud infrastructure engineer myself back in the day, and I remember doing a lot of WMI scripting, a lot of Python scripting, and it's basically I feel like AI is gonna naturally give me a more enhanced starting point.
Thanks, Praveen. We have a lot of, I believe, folks coming from cloud backgrounds. So I believe that question then will sort of help all of these guys. Cool. So I will begin. First, we'll take this particular question. So Naveen, as a machine learning and a software engineer, you come from AI and engineering background. How have you seen generative AI applications, being utilized or being worked on in your day-to-day? Let's say, how is your teams or your extended teams are utilizing generative AI?
Yeah, totally. In my experience at Vouched, we are a startup in digital identity verification space. So we have a tech team composed of scientists and a lot of engineers, back and front end engineers. And I've seen us infuse Gen AI into our product in various ways. So this would be, we are a AI-based company, but specifically Gen AI is, if you look at search by itself, search, keyword-based search, like Elasticsearch is the go-to for a long time. And that is turning on its head with Gen AI, especially with RAG workflows. People are trying to make search more intuitive, more easy to search, and give more complex responses that are reason-based. And Gen AI comes into place here rather than just keyword-based search. So that's one of the use cases we solved for by infusing Gen AI into our search applications. So to do this, if you look at a search team in general, it's composed of a lot of search in full stack SD engineers, a lot of backend engineers, right? So you don't take that team and go bring in a lot of applied scientists to build a Gen AI applications. You technically look for these engineers to build this RAG application by bootstrapping some of the Gen AI knowledge. So, and that's how we did it. So we have some applied scientists that helped through this transformation, but A lot of the work is actually done by the backend engineers who actually took some of these pointers, did some bootstrapping of knowledge on their own, and helped us build this RAG workflow. So this RAG workflow, we just utilized a llama-based model and a Pinecone vector store to store our documents in a private store, and everything is happening locally in our ecosystem. We're not sending any of the private data to OpenAI or any other APIs, and we are able to provide a very innovative search experience, chat experience to our customers by building this. So that's one thing I could think of readily on top of my head. There are several areas we are using Gen AI just to improve the productivity of our workforce. But this is one where we are actually improving our product. Yeah.
Got it. That's very interesting. So we have a couple of questions now coming in. The first question is from Xavier. Do you recommend learning the math background, that is linear algebra, and learning all the algorithms, or just learning how to use these tools, right? So I believe the context, sorry.
Yeah, go ahead, Abhinav, if you want to take it, I can take it as well. Yeah.
Yeah, so I was just going to refer to you itself. So I was
yeah, absolutely. So Xavier, I'm assuming your background is as a software engineering background. In general, when I'm looking for a full stack engineer or a backend engineer with Gen AI skill set, the key skill sets I would like to see is a good understanding of how models work, not the full math behind it. At least understanding of how training and inference works, how the model works in different phases. That's the first and foremost part, and how to handle large amounts of data, because a lot of these Gen AI applications need a lot of data to be set up properly. That needs to be piped properly with proper ethical considerations, ensuring privacy in transit and at rest. So the engineers need to be able to manage this high scale of data effectively. So a toolkit to be able to manage that data. And then, obviously, as I alluded to, the engineers need to be aware of privacy and ethical considerations. This includes like bias considerations, transparency, privacy, and ensuring that the applications are built in an ethical manner. With that said, a traditional software engineer need to be aware of these concepts to be able to conduct good and fruitful brainstorms with the rest of the team. Let's say it's applied scientists or machine learning engineers who are more well-versed in this space. So to do that, having a core understanding of what Gen AI means or what kind of core concepts are being used in Gen AI is very important.
Makes sense. Thanks, Naveen, for pitching in. Now we have a good amount of questions, so we'll go one by one. And I request audience member to also please wait while we sort of answer your question. Cool. So next question is from Sasidhar. So the question is, I'm working as a project portfolio management. I'm working as a project portfolio management tool architect. May I know how generative AI ML would help me find a better role in AI ML or in general? So Praveen, I will sort of request you to sort of pitch in for this particular piece.
Sure. Yeah. So again, Shashi, what I understand is like first you need to understand whether you want to be on the producer side or the consumer side, right? So when I say producer side, it's about whether you're gonna work on a provider of these AI technologies, like it can be Bard, OpenAI, Llama. It doesn't matter what kind of AI methodologies, right? On the other side, like, are you going to consume those Gen AI tools that are available and then build a product or enhance your product as an architect, right? So based on that, you need to figure out like which is the chosen path that interests you, and then start learning the skills around that. Based on that, I think that would enhance your skills around AI ML, and then help you find a role in that area But I think your starting point needs to be like what interests you on the AI side, and then how do you apply it, right?
Got it. Makes sense. Such, if you have a follow-up questions, feel free to drop in. Next couple of questions which I can see are around engineering management. As a senior, so this is a question from Viren. As a senior engineering manager, what sort of involvement is for you? Is it high-level design and product strategies versus detailed design discussions, code-level involvement, review, text, etc.? Shivani, would you like to take a stab at it?
Yeah, I mean, it depends on which company you work for. If you work for a more smaller startup, they would expect you to get hands dirty and help out as well if necessary. And I'm myself, considering some of these options in the long term for me, whether, a good manager role at a senior manager role at a startup versus the manager role at a big company. If you're a manager at a bigger company, there, I think the expectation would be more around, depending again on the title. You're an EM for software development, then you're not expected to have a lot of understanding of how these LLMs are trained, or what are the different model architectures supporting one versus the other and things like that. You can get a high level understanding, but you're not expected to know a lot. What you will be expected is more along the lines of build versus buy, hardware requirements, like what would be the cost of hosting this? Is it meeting would it be worth it given the revenue, the trade-off that you're having, and what kind of in-house LLMs that are, open source LLM hosted in-house versus training something in-house versus hitting an endpoint. Those are some of the discussions that you'd be involved with if you are working on a Gen AI based solution in a large company. And a small level company, depending on what you need to do, if it's a startup, then, all bets are off, right? I hope I've answered that question. But Viren has raised his hand.
Got it.
Just to add to that, I think that's a very well-rounded answer. Just to add to that, in general, as a senior EM or EM, being aware of the Gen AI landscape is important to have those effective discussions and conduct those discussions. You are the face of your team when you're representing and talking with your peers as an engineering manager, right? So you need to be able to be not an expert in that space, but have a level of knowledge so that you can conduct effective discussions with your peers across product or other teams that are more into science.
Yeah, thanks for adding it up. So Viren, I'll just allow you to speak, and then if you have a follow-up questions, please. Yeah. Hey, hi Viren.
Yeah. Can you guys hear me?
Yeah, we can hear you. Yeah.
Okay, no. I think I was about to come the question that I think Naveen has clearly answered. Like how my follow-up question was to Shivani is like, when you conduct this, what sort of the challenge you face, because having too hypothetical knowledge will lose the connection with your team, right? And going too detail might not be good sometimes, because you might be handling multiple projects, and it could be the bandwidth issue as well, right? So trying to find right balance between that. But Shivani, I do understand sometimes like company like Meta prefer more techno manager versus the kind of more of hands-on versus traditional manager that do the more of product strategies, overall like execution, end-to-end executions, right? So do you feel like some of the FANG company also have a difference in terms of expectations?
Yeah, I think definitely. It depends on really on the culture. What I've noticed is that the interview process is going to be very different than what you actually do on the job. And again, the title, if you're going for an ML manager role versus if you're going for a manager role for an infra team that is supporting an ML team, the expectations are going to be different, right? So if you go for an ML manager role, then you'll be expected to know the ins and outs of why one model versus the other for whatever use cases that you're trying to solve. At the level of the size of the model, the number of layers, or the kind of activation functions you're using, or whether it's a mixture of gate model or not, and is it a multitask problem or not, and those type of things. But if you're looking for building like backend applications where generative AI knowledge will be required, right? Build large scale data pipelines, generative AI hooks, serving generative AI. Like if you have like a large language model, then you're having like an adapter that you've trained, and the machine learning team has trained, and you want to host that adapter. Looking into the ops of that. So all of that is also a part of a manager role that's not in the EM for a machine learning. Like it's not an EM machine learning title. It's an engineering manager, in generic engineering manager, even with a big company title. Even there, you definitely need to be aware of the other parts, not the details of those models in particular, but then like what are the ops around this, what are the hardware costs around this, and things like that. So for sure, I think you will hit that point, like you will see that point that you're like learning a lot, and then you'll start seeing the incremental value of just going on, putting hours in learning. At that point, you would be like collecting breadth, right? Like looking at where it applies for your use cases, and how can you support a team that's doing modeling maybe, or even if there's no modeling around, like you don't need to be having a modeling team around. You could still hook up all those architectures, like RAG architectures or other retrieval-based scenarios, embedding-based retrieval, all of those things you can do outside of, even though you don't have a machine learning team itself. Even those things you can do it. But again, the goal is, again, as a manager, right? Like how much of it you do yourself, how much of it you enable your team to do. That's definitely a question, right? So you don't have to get into the weeds of things unless that's the expectation of the role at that company. But mostly what I've seen is the interview process that makes it look like the technical aspects are much more valuable than they actually are once you're on the job.
Okay, makes sense. Yeah, oftentimes, yeah. Cool, thank you.
Yeah, thanks. So we have another question from Purna Chandra. So as a technical program manager, how much knowledge do we need to have about generative AI, and what would be the depth of it, right? So Praveen, would you like to take a quick stab, considering I believe the question is more around the applied side of generative AI in TPM and all?
Sure. Yeah, again, it depends on the type of company that you're going to work for. Like I think Naveen and Shivani were saying again earlier, right? Where if you're working for a startup, right, you're expected to do high level and low level tasks versus you're working for a larger organization with very focused, very focused tasks, then you might actually, stay at the higher level. But it's always better to have as much deeper knowledge as possible, especially because as a TPM, you're interacting with your product teams and the business to understand what the requirements are, or the vision of the product is going to be versus how is it going to be delivered, right? What kind of tech stack are you going to use, whether you're going to use OpenAI's LLMs, or you're going to use somebody else's, right? You're going to what kind of infrastructure are you going to build on it, build it on, and what's going to be a typical timeline that would help you support delivering it as per the business needs versus what's the complexities that are involved to really build it, right? From an engineering standpoint, you need to be able to articulate that bit back and forth and get the right estimate in, right? Obviously, if you ask an engineer to give you an estimate, and if you're going to just stick to it, there's no way you can defend it unless you really understand how that estimate was really generated, right? And if a particular tech stack was used, and you might have more insight from a vision and the product standpoint, and that might not work in a long run. So you might be able to help make that decision working with your engineers or architects, right? So it's always better to keep building on the knowledge and not just stop at a high level.
Yeah, good one, Praveen. Just to add to that, so I would say depth-wise, as a TPM, you probably want to go depth-wise into like challenges involved in building an LLM application or a Gen AI application. Scope of, how to assess the scope of and how you can scope creep can happen in a Gen AI application and address that effectively. So that's where you would be expected to excel if you are managing a Gen AI build. And you're expected to ask those kind of questions, have effective discussions with your partners.
Thanks, Naveen. Thanks, Praveen. So next couple of questions are, in general, and these questions get asked a lot. Let's say, so this is a question from Lakshmi. AI ecosystem is vast, and how to narrow it down. Which AI skills are essentials? I believe, let's say, for your own respective job domain. And another question, as it is a slight variation of it, let's say generative AI is moving so fast, right? How do I know basically this is the right time to get in, or should I even sort of, it's too much to follow? How should I keep up with it? Right? Shivani, would you like to take the first step, and then we'll also take opinions from Naveen and Praveen as well?
Yeah, Lakshmi, I think firstly, it's very vast. I've been doing this for 20 years and I still think there is a lot to keep learning. I think there are two ways to approach it, right? Like think about the breadth and then think about the depth. So breadth is more about being aware about what's going on outside, as well as what's happening within your company. And then the second part is to be more depth driven for the project that you have been assigned, or once you get a project that you want to work on. And the best way to even make the breadth a little bit more specific to what you want is to think about the areas where you are already doing what you're doing. So for example, if you're a mobile engineer, then look into recommendation algorithms for mobile app recommendation and then go from there, right? And it's a very simple exercise. Literally go to scholar.google.com, type in the area that you're working in and to put in keywords like LLM, Gen AI, look at what kind of survey papers come out. Start with that to get a sense of where those applications exist today. So if you're working in healthcare, for example, then go and look into ML in healthcare kind of certification. Outside of also, like in addition to what you're doing here, like there are like courses available or material available outside to do that. But that is just more like a good nice to have. I would say that if you do this course here and you get some of the basics going, then Medium is also a great resource. I use Medium subscription a lot because I can type in things and I get like summarized papers and all of those things. So it helps me also like quickly accelerate my paper reading. I have a goal of doing one paper under an hour. Like I should be able to read a paper and get to the end of it high level just with under an hour or two. And I have like, I put myself as the person within my company to say, I'm going to, present a paper every week, no matter what, right? Even though I'm a manager now of leading 11 people, it does get exhausting, but I put that timer on my calendar and I do that one paper that I have to present, even if it is super high level and even if it takes just 2 hours for me to go through it. So there are like small habits that you can build over a long period of time. The goal is to be very humble and open here. I wouldn't expect my own self doing this for 20 years. I feel I still don't know anything. And every time there's something new that comes up, some new area. So you will never ever, it's not about a certain threshold. It's just about really doing it every single day and building and enjoying the journey, basically, right? Like if you're struck with awe that, oh my God, so many things can be possible with these tools, with these models, then the awe is already there. All you're doing is like continuing the practice of being struck by awe. That's the reason we're all here, right? That's the reason I'm doing this 20 years later, because I was struck by awe some 20 plus years ago that this is wonderful. So I hope that's helpful, Lakshmi.
Ivani, if I had the same goals, that would be awesome. Like, doing one paper per week, that's awesome. I wish I could do that. I have goals actually, but I never am able to do one paper per week, but that's a good one. So just to add to that, Lakshmi, I don't know your background. Are you from software engineering background, or are you in the product program management roles? Just want to make sure I add the relevant stuff as per your role. So just to add to Shivani, I'm also like, I can't say that, I know everything in AI. Nobody can, right? So I started my career in more traditional ML approaches 17 years ago. And I bootstrapped myself over the years, whether, focusing on NLP for a set of years and then focusing on computer vision for a set of years. So depending on where your product and company is, focus on that and where you want to be. So that's how I bootstrapped myself over the years. Again, I didn't see what your background is, so not sure. Yeah, I can add anything more. Yeah.
I would just like to add to that, right? So again, Naveen, great point, Shivani. So my journey started something like that, right? I was working as an infrastructure engineer back in the day, and I was also doing a lot of cloud sales for Microsoft. And I was like always wondering, like, what the hell, like, when we talk to a customer and understand requirements and then go build a POC and go back to the customer, the requirements might have changed or the customer might have moved to something else, right? And it's like, why is that such a big lag between when we collect requirements versus when we are quickly spinning up a environment based on architectural requirements? And then that kind of haunted me for quite a bit, right? And that was my problem that I wanted to solve. And that's when I think AI was still in very early stages. Like, we were still using statistical model for ML training, and we kind of used one of the hackathons and built a prototype. It was like 30% accurate, and nobody really gave a serious look at it, right? But then we kind of didn't leave it, right? And we kind of started learning about, okay, what's the enhancements that are coming up? And then when the neural model became like, relevant, we started using that and started training our data with the neural model. And then our accuracy went up to like 80-90%. And then, all you needed to do was like drop, your architecture diagram on a piece of paper or on the drawing board, and then upload it. And then within 20-30 minutes, your infrastructure on Azure would be up and running, right? And then that kind of people started taking us seriously, right? And I had no AI background, right? Until then, AI was like something I always felt AI was, okay, you need to have a PhD and you need to have like geeky brain to really understand, right? But then, like the interest and the problem kind of drove me to really learn the specific area. And then I was like, okay, I fell in love with computer vision. I fell in love with NLP and improving that. And that's where one of the patents that we got is on that area as well, right? For me, what I look at it as, it's always like you have a vast acreage of land. Now you want to build a palace, right? But how do you build it, right? You start with a great foundation, so you understand fundamentals. So you build lay the foundation, and then start with one room, and then you keep on adding to it, and eventually you're going to build a palace out of it, right? But then if your foundation is not strong, it's going to crumble. Like, you can have the best design in mind, but it's not going to work, right? So I would say, like, start with a small problem, build strong fundamentals, and keep growing on that. It's not a one-day thing or a year thing. It's going to be a continuous learning that you both were talking about earlier.
That's a very good point, Praveen. Thanks, Shivani and Naveen as well. I believe there was a follow-up question from Sija as well. So I think this was Shivani for you. So where do we publish the papers within the company or outside? I think this is from the point where you were mentioning about paper reading and etc.
Yeah, so there's this resource that I follow that I can send over on the chat, but usually I find like a lot of different typical problems that are out there in the industry that they always come from very, very typical problems like feature engineering, identifying harmful content, doing image search, prediction, these kind of problems. Like, if you go to basics and say, okay, if I got those questions in the interview, of course, that's the interview process too, but it really opens up your eyes to what kind of problems are being solved out there. And sometimes AI/ML may not be necessary. Sometimes AI/ML is necessary to solve those problems. So that's one way to kind of look at the broad applications. So I follow, that I follow Medium a lot. I also follow a lot of the machine learning blogs for each of those companies, like Pinterest, and I think of like a phase, like, okay, I have 12 papers from Pinterest that I want to read just because I'm interested in what they're up to. So I'll create a 12-week plan, one paper a week, 12 weeks Pinterest paper, right? Like, just to kind of keep updated. Then another 12 weeks, okay, let me go stalk Uber's page, and then I'll read some papers from there, and then I'll cycle through. By the time I've finished all those, and I come back, and I'm like, oh my God, there has been another few papers that have come out from Pinterest, for example. So there are some companies that are very good at publishing. So Pinterest is one, LinkedIn is one. Their engineering blogs are amazing and very, very insightful for those problems. And I mean, of course, startups don't do that too much, but like, ideally, every company that should have this kind of branding, right? Like, that's good for yourself as well. So if you're working on something, definitely think about how can you create a blog for your company, or how can you post in the blog that you have for your company, so that you're creating a brand for yourself based on what you're doing so far. But that's like a long, like, short answer. Like, I like the practitioners papers. I don't like super research papers, because I definitely want to see how those are being applied to what we do every single day. Yeah.
Got it. Thanks. I think the next question is from Viren. So Viren has asked that does generative AI need traditional machine learning knowledge as well? Is it nice to have, or should go for basics of AI ML first? So I believe I'll set the context. So if I believe the goal is basically to move in as a generative AI engineer or double down on that particular site, right, where you are able to build, train, and fine tune the models, generative AI models, LLM. So you obviously then need a lot of background knowledge on how, let's say, deep learning works, and eventually the classical ML, which is, let's say, traditional ML work. But if your goal is basically to utilize generative AI in your day-to-day, then I think that much knowledge may not be required. You would then be expected to know more around the use case side, how it works. You can abstract away a lot of the internal workings, which a machine learning engineer should be concerned with, if you are going more from a practical route. Right? Is there anything, Naveen, you would like to add on this one?
Yeah, I mean, as I was alluding to earlier, I think the fundamentals are important. So you should be able to, understand how ML development in general works. As an EM, it's very important. You're not expected to be an expert in how models are being developed, but you should know the basics, like, what are the challenges involved, what are the limitations. That would make you effective as a leader when you are integrating these AI applications into your system or having discussions with your counterparts in ML teams, and so that you're building a massive product together, right? So you're collaborating on that. So that would help you become more effective in those discussions. So that's what I would suggest. Yes, for sure, have good understanding of fundamentals, but don't go too deep into like math or anything. Just move on to what your application area is next. Like, if you are more interested, if your company is more focused on Gen AI based, LLM based applications, move on to that. Or if it's focused on, a CV based application like a lot of object detection or semantic segmentation, just move on to some of that, or NLP, whatever that is.
Thanks, Naveen. Anil has asked, are there any open source AI playgrounds where I can learn generative AI skills and gain experience applying them? So I believe there are a lot of, there is obviously a playground provided by OpenAI, which is ChatGPT playground, where you can build custom GPTs and etc. There are a few paid versions as well, where you can do a lot of prompt engineering and build custom GPTs as well, from their UI and all. Don't have to go into that particular details and all. So I would suggest you can start with that, and obviously there are, if you know how to, let's say, host a model locally and etc. So there's Llama and Mistral, those sort of things as well, which you can use to quickly experiment, build some quick POCs and etc. And there are documentation available as well. So OpenAI has a good amount of documentation. So if you're someone basically who can navigate through those, so I think you can build quick and easy projects from there as well. Cool. The next.
I think he's frozen. Is everybody frozen?
No, I think
yeah, I think Abhinav is having some connectivity issues.
Maybe we can pick it up.
All right.
Fayaz has the next question. How important are GitHub or Kaggle or both in applications? Also, I see most jobs asking for years of experience in ML. How do you handle that if we want to switch to ML?
Sorry, guys, I think I lost my connection.
We just read the next question for you.
Okay. Which one?
Fayaz has a question about how important Kaggle or GitHub.
Yeah. Sure. So would you like to take a stab? So this is done. This is answered?
No, not yet. I just read the question.
Okay. So Shivani, then would you like to take a stab at it? How important is GitHub and Kaggle to showcase your experience when you're applying for ML jobs?
If you're doing an IC job and you're going for an IC role in a backend team or a team that's going to actually be doing ML engineering, then that would be helpful to showcase some projects there. But it's not a major requirement, I would say. And if they ask for more ML background, I mean, especially if you're a very experienced person and they over-index on just the ML background, I would say like use your network to get reference into that company. I wouldn't say that that should be a blocker for you. Mainly the thing is to get a reference and then be able to kill at the interviews, right? Then the question can come, okay, you still don't have a background match, so we'll place you in a team that's adjacent to doing to the team that's doing LLM modeling, for example. So you can support as an infra engineer or you can support as a backend engineer. So that may happen that even after you kill it at the interviews, get a reference, get the job, interview going and all that and kill it, even then you might still end up in the situation where you don't get the exact title or role that you want. I don't know exactly what your title or background is, but if that happens, then one way to mitigate that is to still use references to get into the interview process and then join that company that's doing AI/ML as a backend engineer or any other capacity, and then make an adjacent movement after a year within the team, right? So that's one way to handle that. I don't know if that has been a helpful answer, Faiz. Yeah.
I totally echo that and strongly echo that as well. And I've seen a lot of careers help a lot of careers move in that direction as well. So my decision tree there would be as a software engineer, which I am assuming you are when you ask the question how to switch to ML. If you are in early stages of your career and you're okay with going as a junior MLE, then you can directly apply for MLE roles after acquiring a lot of knowledge in the space. Having specific Kaggle on your resume is not a requirement, like Shivani said. So you can just bring in your project experience from IK or whatever course you're doing, and you can indicate that you're joining as an SD1 or MLE1, and you can go through the interview process. But let's say you are a mid senior level, like someone with 4 or 5 years of experience, and you wanted to move into a ML role, do a lateral move. The best course of action in this case is to see if you can, after acquiring the knowledge, see if you can move into that sort of role within your company. That's the first best course of action, because doing the move to a new company and to a new role is typically very hard. Or the second best course, like Shivani said, is go to the new company where there is ML, assuming that your existing company doesn't support ML-based role. Go to the new company as an SD and then make a lateral move. I think that would be ideal switch. Yeah.
And I think it's no different than switching roles, right? Like in my case, like I was an engineer to start with, and then moved into TPM and then into product. And when I faced my first interview from engineer to TPM, the obvious question was, you don't have any TPM experience. Like, why would we even consider you for the role, right? It's all about like, how do you convince the person on the other side, right? Like, how did you build experiences, or how can you showcase passion, right? Maybe your GitHub repository or Kaggle might be one of those points that shows that you are passionate about it, and there are certain things that you've done in the area, right? So what I did was, like, I was, as an engineer, I was already taking up some TPM responsibilities and then contributing to the cost. So it was an easy justification for me to tell the hiring manager that I'm already doing that, I just don't have a formal title. How hard can it be to do it formally, right? So it's all about showing that passion and building on what you have, and then making tagging that to the requirements of the role.
Thanks Praveen and Naveen for adding that. There's a follow-up question which also gets asked in that exact scenario, is that does companies prefer AI/ML with masters or self-taught AI/ML or any other course in general, right? So masters versus, let's say, some practical skills.
I would honestly say that would get you a foot in the door, right? It might get you an interview call because you check all the boxes in terms of experiences or a degree requirement if there exists one, but then end of the day it's all about whether you have that skill set, right? It's not about just completing a degree or a certificate and then expecting the job to be given to you purely based on the experience on the resume, right? But rather you need to be able to show that expertise. On the other hand, if you don't have that degree but you have experiences that can actually vouch for you, and when you actually get the interview call, it's all about you proving that you have that expertise. It's not about the degree. A lot of companies don't even ask for technical degrees anymore. So and I don't think AI ML is any different.
Got it.
Totally echo that. Only thing is there is some requirement of quantitative degrees in a lot of companies like Amazon, like for example, it could be any of the quantitative background, like any of the engineering background or computer science background. There is no specific like ML, degree or anything like that. Yeah, totally.
Thank you, guys. The next question is for technical product manager role. What should be the focus area considering both sides, consuming and producing generative AI? So Praveen, I would like you to take a stab. This is the first product manager question. So yeah.
Yeah, I mean, it's again, like it depends on, if let's say, let's pick an example, right? So you want to be on the consumer side, you want to leverage Gen AI into your product. Now, what are the set of features that your product have? How do you enhance? Like, what's your roadmap looking like, right? And how do you achieve that faster using Gen AI? So that's one path. The other path is like, are you gonna provide any additional features? Like, for example, one of the products that we run is a platform for platform engineers to manage their Kubernetes infrastructure. So what we did there was we saw one of the major problems customers had was going through our documentation and troubleshooting it themselves. So that's why we were getting a lot of support tickets. How do we solve this problem, right? By making it easier for them to troubleshoot. So we could do so many things, right? We can improve our logging, we can improve our documentation, but we also wanted to implement AI-based solution. So what we did was we started developing a chatbot and trained it using our specific data. The RAG model that we built was based on our documentation, our logs, and our GitHub repository. So all this combined together, we provided this bot to our customers. Now they don't raise as many support tickets as previously seen, but rather just ask the chatbot, and they either find the documentation easily or even are able to troubleshoot the problem themselves. So it's about identifying the problem and then how do you apply that. So that's the example I was talking about. If you are a consumer of AI side, on the producer side, you can think of similarly, like how do I with our LMs or our Gen AI offering, how do I compete with our competitors? Like, for example, OpenAI, they need to be at the top of their game. Otherwise, Bard or Llama or some other AI provider is going to beat them in their own game, right? So that's how you pick and choose, the areas that you want to focus on, and how do you want to apply that in your scope of work.
Makes sense. Thanks, Praveen. The next question is for software engineers, something similar. So may I know AI ML software engineers day-to-day key responsibilities, activities in FANG companies? So anything specific there which is expected? Naveen, would you like to take a first stab at it?
Yeah, it's a broad question. So is it a general software engineer or is it an ML engineer that
I think
the learner is asking?
So, Shashi, if you are there, I mean, we can unmute you and you can sort of clarify the question for better
I think
understanding.
Sasigar is a project portfolio management architect. I remember that from the earlier question.
Okay, I have unmuted you, Sissy, so you can
Yeah,
talk.
Naveen, yes. So I'm playing multiple roles here, even though I am a portfolio management tool called Plan U and HPPPM architect, but I also play like regular software engineer role on my day-to-day job. I'm working as a consultant, so there is no title actually. So software engineer as well as I know SQL, .NET developer. I do play multiple roles. That's why I'm confused. Like, if I go to AI or ML role, what will be my day-to-day responsibilities, right?
Yeah, so as a ML engineer role, I would take
Yeah.
that. Your day to day would be, you're working with, your product partner or your product stakeholders and your EM on requirements of a given ML model. And most companies, MLE is a role where the MLEs get to build models. In some companies, it's very specific to deploying models. So I would keep it more generic for this discussion. So a day to day would be you're taking the requirements, designing a model, and working with your team to ratify that design, and working on experiments to execute that design. And once you build the model, you're essentially looking to deploy it, assuming it has fulfilled all the requirements. So a lot of reviews with your stakeholders, and then deploy to production, and the whole feedback loop continues again. So you continue to maintain and operate it and improve it. So that's a day to day. That's a generic MLE or an applied scientist at Amazon, or most other FANG companies.
I see.
Hopefully that answers. So if you're asking
Yeah,
for a more generic back-end engineer role, that would be slightly different. So yeah.
that's fine. Thank you. Clarified. Thank you so much.
Thanks, Saji. Thanks, Naveen. Yeah. So getting back, so there another question is from anonymous attendee. There seems to be focus on AI ops in platform engineering DevOps. Can you talk a bit about some use cases and implementation in AI ops some of you are seeing at your respective companies? So Shivani, would you like to take a stab, particularly at AI ops engineering/DevOps?
Yeah, so yeah, AI ops and definitely AI ops is very important because a part of the platform is to also be able to, I mean, ML ops has been around for a while now, actually. But now it's, I think, moving on to including LLMs as well, because you need to monitor the usage of the LLMs and reallocate GPUs, because there's always arguments between orgs who's using more GPUs and things like that. So there are those type of things also that need to be done. But in general, for any AI ops or ML ops, you're thinking through all kind of observability for these models, like are the features being generated correctly, are the data pipelines correctly generated, is the data that's coming for training these models or inference is reliable and has good quality. So those type of things. Then of course, if you're serving the results of your LLM or generative AI or any ML model through endpoints, through offline data, then adding observability on those. Couple of others, depending on the package, like depending on the situation. Like some companies have in-house infrastructure, then there's more scope for ML ops. In some companies, you use a managed cloud, either AWS, Azure, or Databricks and such. In that case, the group is a little smaller, but even there, I think using your engineering background to set guidelines, right, like model cards, those type of things that can ensure that people are not just writing random, the code is not just going blasting all over. People are not writing over each other. There's always a good understanding of what is the model that's currently in production and what models are being experimented with. So building all those systems is also requires software engineering knowledge. But yes, that is something that you can be expecting to do. Yeah.
Thanks, Shivani. Naveen, would you like to add anything on top of it?
I think Shivani was comprehensive there. Again, a lot of emphasis on observability, reproducibility, like how you track your ML experiments, ensuring that you can reproduce a given result at any point of time, like even during monitoring phase, like Shivani was alluding to. How do you know which model is working at any given point of time, and how do you hot swap models for experimentation, and coming to the bare bones of infrastructure management. How do you effectively manage GPU versus CPU? How do you fine tune it? Like using profiler tools like NVIDIA Profiler to ensure that there are no bottlenecks between CPU and GPU calls, ensuring that the memory and CPU and GPU are being used effectively. So all of this falls under the umbrella of MLOps. So there are so many specializations you can go within the MLOps itself, but it's important to have the broader knowledge of what the scope there is from end to end. And then you're as in a day-to-day, you might be probably focused on one aspect of it. So that's how it's practically used in most big tech companies.
Just to add to that, there's a bunch of customers that we work with, and they're doing more and more, AI implementation in their platform engineering side of work, the things, right? So a couple of use cases that are most commonly seen across the board are, optimizing infrastructure, right? Especially, like Shivani and Naveen, you were talking about GPU usage, right? GPUs are expensive right now. It's going to come down at some point, but they're expensive, right? So you need to see like where do you see usage gaps that can be addressed and optimize them to reduce cost. But also, one of the things that we are seeing is predictive analytics. In terms of if you're at some point your infrastructure is gonna scrap out, or they're gonna completely go down from a usage standpoint, you automatically scale instances based on that, or add instances for higher usage scenarios, right? That way you basically enhance the performance of the platform, but also reduce costs wherever possible. So the very common scenarios that we are seeing across platform engineering teams focusing on that.
Thanks, Praveen, Naveen, and Shivani. I think that's a really comprehensive sort of an answer. It's the first AIOps answer as well, question as well. So I think the answer was quite comprehensive. That helps. Another question. This question is from Kin, sort of an interesting one. So when it comes to generative AI, the output of that, would it be ownership of the company who created the generative AI tool, or the user who described it for the generative AI tool? So usage rights and etc. So if there is anything, I believe something which is generated by generative AI, will it be called the ownership, the company who created it, or the user who described it? So Praveen, you would like I saw.
Yeah, I mean, great question, Ken. And this is not the first time I'm hearing this. And last we read a lot of terms and conditions for a lot of Gen AI providers. The output is not owned by the provider. The output is public because most of these models are built using public data, right? So there's nothing proprietary that they own. It's basically curation of data that would have given you the result that is shown from the Gen AI tool, right? So technically they can't claim rights, and we have not seen any rights issues so far in the market. I don't know if it's going to change, but at least because the training data has been public and the results have been not really copyrighted, it should be fine from a usage standpoint. It's a public data, and I don't think even the person who is doing prompt engineering and generating that data can claim it to be a copyright for themselves. It's still a public data.
It's a very nuanced answer, and you took a great stab at answering it, Praveen. So laws are still forming here, so it depends on which country you ask this question. It's kind of different answer. So technically, I mean, most cases, what Praveen said is right. Like the usage rights, and a user is given the rights, and sometimes the tool itself tells in their licenses that the usage rights belong to the user, as long as it's been paid for and used properly. But the laws are still in the flux here. A lot of new rules coming here, so it's good to stay connected. Like if you're trying to use the creative content generated by an AI tool, and understand what the copyright limitations are.
Thanks, Praveen and Naveen. So
Great point, Naveen. Like I just remembered instance. Like we were working with we were training a bunch of students, and then one of the teams actually generated a 30-minute movie purely based on Gen AI. It was like the music, the animations, the characters, everything, right? And then they wanted to actually try selling it to one of the streaming platforms, right? It is still in the conversations, but then they're not able to figure out whether they can technically sell it to anybody or not, right? So they ended up making it available on YouTube, but then this has been a problem that kind of resonates with a lot of people who are trying to create content and then try to make business out of it.
Yeah. So I was going to add that particular piece itself. So let's say when these generative AI use cases are being more and more prevalent, what sort of ethical considerations we have, and I believe there is a lot of privacy concerns as well when it comes to, let's say, new companies adapting generative AI and ML. So anything, Praveen, we'll start from you. Would you like to add on top of what you just mentioned?
Yeah, again, it's from I don't know, like again, if you ask this question to different people in different businesses, right, you're gonna get a different answer. But from pretty much standards standpoint, right, I think we don't. These are still, like Naveen said, the ethical rules are still forming. But then again, the recommendation would be to go with the path of least resistance, and then and then just don't get into trouble, right? Because I've heard like so many different responses to this question from different industries that we are talking to. Even I'm not able to take a stance on what is right and what path would I recommend to others.
So just to add to that, there are some, especially I think Google was one of the first to come up with responsible AI principles, like do no harm, and there are a bunch of things that I can't clearly state now, but most of them revolve around these core principles, right? Transparency, like how transparent are your AI systems? Putting more emphasis around how the decisions are made, how different logics are being created at different points of your system, and accountability is another major factor that goes into building these systems. Like who is responsible for decisions made by the AI systems at different points. Like if AI system makes an error, like who is going to be responsible for that? So that's a very important one as you're designing these AI systems as a product, holistic product. You can't just say, hey, AI made this decision, and that's an illegal decision somehow. It turned out to be, and now who is responsible? So building accountability into your product, that's very important. Privacy is paramount. So a lot of data, a lot of sensitive data related to users is being used in Gen AI applications, and ensuring that the data collection, processing, and storage, both at rest and transit, are compliant with with applicable laws. For example, if you're operating in UI, the laws are very different compared to GDPR laws versus versus in US. And several other countries. So depending on where you're operating, the privacy considerations could be very different. But there are some core principles that need to be adhered. And fairness, more importantly, how biased or unbiased your systems are, ensuring that you have strong measurement practices for bias measurement. So I'll give a simple example. So if you build a model that's based on predominantly US data, so it would be biased towards a certain ethnicity or race, because that's how the data is generated. So all the societal biases that are out there create the data that is biased, and that gets inhibited into your model. So ensuring that your models are considering that and ensuring that bias is not being propagated that way is very important. So those are the four main core principles that I keep in mind, especially when, delivering a Gen AI or any AI system. Every company comes up with their own tenets and ethics, that revolve around this. But those are some things that come to my mind.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, fortunately, I was working with OpenAI very closely back in the day at Microsoft, and I led the product to onboard OpenAI to Azure infrastructure. And then, these conversations were, again, prevalent back in the day as well. And one of the confidence scores that they were talking about, using ethical responses and no bias and all this, right? Were very high. The confidence scores were very high. But then, recently we were doing some experimentation where we asked a question about a particular generating an image for a particular type of person, right? And the response was very biased, right? So I think it was about something related to an Asian person, and the response basically showed Asia is a pretty large continent, and there are like different people from different races and all. But every time the response would be a Chinese individual, right? And even the description would actually match that, right? So even with so many controls in place, the bias still happens. And when we actually went back and asked why these responses are like that, and it wasn't, the response was very interesting. They said like it's not because of the bias, but it's because of the kind of training data, and it has nothing to do with race, but it's about, it's more about the kind of image repository that was used and the trainings that were done. So it said it's not because of bias, it's more because of the kind of data, right? Again, you cannot have like all the data in the world and give the best possible answer. So we're always going for the most, most accurate as per the kind of data that we have, right? So it's weird. Like I think it's going to take some time to build that maturity, but again, I think it's going to take some time. Sure.
Thanks, Praveen, Naveen. I saw Shivani as well answering a lot of questions in the Q&A by typing them out. I believe we don't have any further questions. So yeah, hey, hi guys. If you have any questions, we are taking some last couple of questions, and then I think we had a very good discussion. Touched a lot of areas. I think I was just making a list. So we had a question on product managers, software engineers, cloud solution architects, engineering managers, TPMs, AI ops / DevOps, discuss the ethical considerations, and then whole lot of anecdotes from our expert panel. So yeah, if there is anything else, please feel free to either raise your hand or drop a question. Can you give more details regarding the coursework? So, Sahul, I would basically what I will do is I will ask my team to reach out to you. So there are a bunch of programs within AI that we offer. Some of the programs are longer, some programs are shorter. So depending upon your needs, they can basically guide you better. And any sort of technical discussion you want to have, basis how will, let's say, it impact your current role within your company, or you want to switch. So all that details can be shared with you in your, in a more one-on-one type of setting, right? So, we'll give you a call back and share the details accordingly. Cool. Cool. Then, if there are no further questions, thanks a lot, guys, for joining in. Thank you, Shivani, Praveen, Naveen, for the amazing discussion and sharing your knowledge with every one of us. Thank you, guys, for staying. I think we are about 90-minute mark, and having such an interactive session. We had a couple of questions ourselves as well, and we saw it getting covered naturally with all sort of discussions that we had. And I was just saying we had quite a diverse sort of discussion, and we didn't have to actually fill in some of the questions from our list. So great session. Thank you, Shivani, Naveen, Praveen, for your time, and we'll hope to do these sessions more in the future. Cool.
Thank you so much, everyone.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you for setting this up.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, guys. Bye.